stage for where he imagines he's going to go. And then in the coming days, he'll see the reaction to that, to the speech tonight, and that will influence his ultimate judgment.
Sources tell ABC News that President Trump was briefed on ground operations. No final decision has been made, apparently, according to our sources. What would an operation like that look like?
Well, we've only assembled a very limited ground force in the region. I mean, something like several thousand combat Marines, several thousand troops from the 82nd Airborne Division, some special forces, and so forth. That force is not sufficient to conduct a significant ground operation. You could seize very limited objectives on the ground, perhaps the islands controlling the Strait of Hormuz, or some have suggested Karg Island, which is deeper in the Persian Gulf, from which Iran exports its energy. But even those operations would need to be limited in scale and scope, and very importantly, duration, because once you put troops on the ground, you've got to support them. And any of those options, I think, would be very complicated.
It seems like the other two big topics tonight, negotiations and then the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has said the strait must be open, quote, open, free, and clear before ceasefire talks even start. Is that feasible?
Well, we'll see. I mean, Iran's got a vote here. Geography still counts. And the geography is such that Iran controls the strait. It's only 20 miles wide. It's within artillery range of Iranian systems. And we can't expect to eliminate 100% of Iran's capability to threaten shipping in the Persian Gulf. And even if they don't threaten it physically, they present sufficient risk that the insurance markets make it implausible, make it economically infeasible for those shippers to pass through the strait until there's some assurance that they're actually going to be safe.
And then finally here, very quickly, we know that President Trump has been threatening some of our NATO partners with the possibility of getting out of NATO. Feasible, yes or no? We only have a couple seconds left here.
So look, legally, the president would have to go to Congress to get congressional approval to depart NATO. But in practical terms, there are steps he can take as the commander-in-chief that would severely limit U.S. participation in NATO.
Could be a historic speech tonight. Retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute, thank you for your time. So President Trump's address is set to start any minute here now. We are told 9 o'clock Eastern is when everything should get going. So in just a few seconds here, this is a live look in Washington, D.C. We have some live coverage coming up here on ABC News Live. We're going to turn it over to Prime Anchor Linsey Davis, who will carry us as President Trump speaks tonight. Stay with us.
Is an ABC News special presidential address to the nation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis at ABC News headquarters in New York. We are coming on the air because President Trump is about to address the nation with an update on the war in Iran from the cross hall of the White House. It is the first time President Trump is speaking to the American people in prime time since launching the war almost 5 weeks ago. Just this week, the president outlined a potential end to the war, offering a timeline of 2 to 3 weeks. But it's not clear which conditions need to be met for the president to end the conflict. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed, though Iran is allowing some ships to go through. Just today, President Trump said Iran is asking for a ceasefire, but that the U.S. would only consider it after the Strait of Hormuz is open, free, and clear. But Iran responded that they haven't asked for a ceasefire, and one top official said the strait will be open, but not for you. The closure of the strait sending fuel prices worldwide soaring and gas prices here at home skyrocketing to more than $4 a gallon. The president has insisted that those prices will drop quickly once the operation ends. New polling shows that many are eager for just that. 60% of Americans disapprove of the Iran war, and 2/3 say that the U.S. should work to end the conflict quickly. But President Trump repeatedly insists that the operation is succeeding, and the goal of ensuring that Iran will not be able to build a nuclear weapon has been achieved. Earlier today, the president expressed his frustrations with NATO allies who have refused to join the war effort, saying the U.S. might exit the NATO alliance. His words sending chills through Europe and some of America's oldest and strongest allies. You see the president approaching the podium right now. Let's take a listen.
Thank you very much. My fellow Americans, good evening. Let me begin by congratulating the team at NASA and our brave astronauts on the successful launch of Artemis II. It was quite something. It will be traveling further than any manned rocket has ever flown and will very substantially pass the moon, go around it, and come back home from a distance that has never been done before. It's amazing. They are on the way, and God bless them. These are brave people. We want to God bless those 4 unbelievable astronauts. As we speak this evening, it's been just 1 month since the United States military began Operation Epic Fury, targeting the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, Iran. In these past 4 weeks, our armed forces have delivered swift, decisive, overwhelming victories on the battlefield, victories like few people have ever seen before. Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them terrorist regime they led, are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons, factories, and rocket launchers are being blown to pieces. Very few of them left. Never in the history of warfare has an enemy suffered such clear and devastating large-scale losses in a matter of weeks. Our enemies are losing in America, as it has been for 5 years under my presidency, is winning, and now winning bigger than ever before. Before discussing this current situation, I also want to thank our troops for the masterful job they did in taking the country of Venezuela in a matter of minutes. That hit was quick, lethal, violent, and respected by everyone all over the world. After rebuilding our military during my first term, we have by far the strongest military anywhere in the world. And now we're working along with Venezuela and are, in a true sense, joint venture partners. We're getting along incredibly well in the production and sale of massive amounts of oil and gas, the second largest reserves on Earth after the United States of America. We're now totally independent of the Middle East, and yet we are there to help. We don't have to be there. We don't need their oil. We don't need anything they have, but we're there to help our allies. Tonight, I want to provide an update on the tremendous progress our warriors have made in Iran and discuss why Operation Epic Fury is necessary for the safety of America and the security of the free world. From the very first day I announced my campaign for president in 2015, I have vowed that I would never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. This fanatical regime has been chanting death to America, death to Israel for 47 years. Their proxies were behind the murder of 241 Americans in the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, the slaughter of hundreds of our service members with roadside bombs. They were involved in the attack on the USS Cole, and they carried out the countless other heinous acts, including the just horrible, bloody atrocities of October 7th in Israel, something that most people have never seen anything like it. This murderous regime also recently killed 45,000 of their own people who were protesting in Iran. 45,000 dead. For these terrorists to have nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat. The most violent and thuggish regime on earth would be free to carry out their campaigns of terror, coercion, conquest, and mass murder from behind a nuclear shield. I will never let that happen, and neither should any of our past presidents. This situation has been going on for 47 years and should have been handled long before I arrived in office. I did many things during my 2 terms in office to stop the quest for nuclear weapons by Iran first, and perhaps most importantly, I killed General Qasem Soleimani in my first term. He was an evil genius, brilliant person, a horrible human being, however. the father of the roadside bomb, and he lived. Just horrible what he did. Iran would have been perhaps in far better, stronger position. Had he lived, we would have had probably a different conversation tonight. But you know what? We'd still be winning and winning big. And then, very importantly, I terminated Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, a disaster. Obama gave them $1.7 billion in cash, green cash, took it out of banks from Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, all the cash they had. He flew it by airplanes in an attempt to buy their respect and loyalty, but it didn't work. They laughed at our president and went on with their mission to have a nuclear bomb. His Iran deal would have led to a colossal arsenal of massive nuclear weapons for Iran, and they would have had them years ago, and they would have used them. It would have been a different world. There would have been no Middle East and no Israel right now, in my opinion, the opinion of a lot of great experts, had I not terminated that terrible deal. And I was so honored to do it. I was so proud to do it. It was so bad right from the beginning. Essentially, I did what no other president was willing to do. They made mistakes, and I am correcting them. My first preference was always the path of diplomacy, yet the regime continued their relentless quest for nuclear weapons and rejected every attempt at an agreement. For this reason, in June, I ordered a strike on Iran's key nuclear facilities, an Operation Midnight Hammer. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Those beautiful B-2 bombers performed magnificently. We totally obliterated those nuclear sites. The regime then sought to rebuild their nuclear program at a totally different location, making clear they had no intention of abandoning their pursuit of nuclear weapons. They were also rapidly building a vast stockpile of conventional ballistic missiles and would soon have had missiles that could reach the American homeland, Europe, and virtually any other place on Earth. Iran's strategy was so obvious. They wanted to produce as many missiles as possible, and they did, with the longest range possible. And they had some weapons that nobody believed they had. We just learned that out. We took them out. We took them all out so that no one would really dare stop them. And their race for a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon like nobody's ever seen before. They were right at the doorstep. For years, everyone has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but in the end, those are just words if you're not willing to take action when the time comes. As I stated in my announcement of Operation Epic Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed, hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before, and annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their missiles are just about used up or beaten. Taken together, these actions will cripple Iran military, crush their ability to support terrorist proxies, and deny them the ability to build a nuclear bomb. Our armed forces have been extraordinary. There's never been anything like it militarily. Everyone is talking about it, and tonight I'm pleased to say that these core strategic objectives are nearing completion. As we celebrate this progress, we think especially of the 13 American warriors who have laid down their lives in this fight to prevent our children from ever having to face a nuclear Iran. Twice this past month, I have traveled to Dover Air Force Base, and it's been something. I wanted to be with those heroes as they return to American soil, and I was with them and their families, their parents, their wives, their husbands. We salute them, and now we must honor them by completing the mission for which they gave their lives. And every single one of the people, their loved ones said, "Please, sir, please finish the job," every one of them. And we are going to finish the job, and we're going to finish it very fast. We're getting very close. I want to thank our allies in the Middle East, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. They've been great, and we will not let them get hurt or fail in any way, shape, or form. Many Americans have been concerned to see the recent rise in gasoline prices here at home. This short-term increase has been entirely the result of the Iranian regime launching deranged terror attacks against commercial oil tankers in neighboring countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. This is yet more proof that Iran can never be trusted with nuclear weapons. They will use them, and they will use them quickly. It would lead to decades of extortion, economic pain, and instability worse than we can ever imagine. The United States has never been better prepared economically to confront this threat. You all know that. We built the strongest economy in history. We're going through it right now, the strongest in history. In 1 year, we've taken a dead and crippled country. I hate to say that, but we were a dead and crippled country after the last administration and made it the hottest country anywhere in the world by far, with no inflation, record-setting investments coming into the United States, over $18 trillion, and the highest stock market ever, with 53 all-time record highs in just 1 year. It all positioned us to get rid of a cancer that has long simmered. It's known as the nuclear Iran, and they didn't know what was coming. They've never imagined it. Remember, because of our Drill Baby Drill program, America has plenty of gas. We have so much gas. Under my leadership, we are #1 producer of oil and gas on the planet, without even discussing the millions of barrels that we're getting from Venezuela. Because of the Trump administration's policies, we produce more oil and gas than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. Think of that, Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. And that number will soon be substantially higher than that. There's no country like us anywhere in the world, and we're in great shape for the future. The United States imports almost no oil through the Hormuz Strait and won't be taking any in the future. We don't need it. We haven't needed it, and we don't need it. We've beaten and completely decimated Iran. They are decimated, both militarily and economically and in every other way. And the countries of the world that do receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage. They must cherish it. They must grab it and cherish it. They can do it easily. We will be helpful, but they should take the lead in protecting the oil that they so desperately depend on. So to those countries that can't get fuel, many of which refuse to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, we had to do it ourselves. I have a suggestion. #1, buy oil from the United States of America. We have plenty. We have so much. And #2, build up some delayed courage. Should have done it before. Should have done it with us, as we asked. Go to the Strait and just take it, protect it, use it for yourselves. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done, so it should be easy. And in any event, when this conflict is over, the Strait will open up naturally. It'll just open up naturally. They're going to want to be able to sell oil because that's all they have to try and rebuild. It will resume the flowing, and the gas prices will rapidly come back down. Stock prices will rapidly go back up. They haven't come down very much, frankly. They came down a little bit, but they've had some very good days over the last couple of days. We've done actually much better than I thought, but we had to take that little journey to Iran to get rid of this horrible threat. With our historic tax cuts, where people are just now talking about receiving larger refunds than they ever thought possible, they are getting so much more money than they thought. That's from the great big beautiful bill. Our economy is strong and improving by the day, and it will soon be roaring back like never before. It will top the levels that it was a month ago. I've made clear from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Thanks to the progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong, In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable. Yet if during this period of time no deal is made, we have our eyes on key targets. If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all, because it would not give them even a small chance of survival or rebuilding. But we could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. Their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force. The nuclear sites that we obliterated with the B-2 bombers have been hit so hard that it would take months to get near the nuclear dust, and we have it under intense satellite surveillance and control. If we see them make a move, even a move for it, we'll hit them with missiles very hard again. We have all the cards, they have none. It's very important that we keep this conflict in perspective. American involvement in World War I lasted 1 year, 7 months, and 5 days. World War II lasted for 3 years, 8 months, and 25 days. The Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. The Vietnam War lasted for 19 years, 5 months, and 29 days. Iraq went on for 8 years, 8 months, and 28 days. We are in this military operation, so powerful, so brilliant, against one of the most powerful countries for 32 days. And the country has been eviscerated and essentially is really no longer a threat. They were the bully of the Middle East, but they're the bully no longer. This is a true investment in your children and your grandchildren's future. The whole world is watching, and they can't leave the power, strength, and brilliance. They just can't believe what they're seeing. They leave it to your imagination, but they can't believe what they're seeing, the brilliance of the United States military. Tonight, every American can look forward to a day when we are finally free from the wickedness of Iranian aggression and the specter of nuclear blackmail. Because of the actions we have taken, we are on the cusp of ending Iran's sinister threat to America and the world. And I'll tell you, the world is watching. And when we do, when it's all over, the United States will be safer, stronger, more prosperous, and greater than it has ever been before. May God bless the men and women of the United States Armed Forces, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, and good night.
And there you have President Trump addressing the American people tonight in prime time, talking about the war in Iran, describing it as Operation Epic Fury, saying that it has been overwhelming victories on the battlefield, saying that Iran's Navy is gone, their Air Force is in ruins, their leaders are dead. He went on to say that the situation has been going on for 47 years and should have been ended a long time ago. He described it as his pleasure and a necessity to eliminate President Obama's Iran nuclear agreement. He went on to say, we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. I want to bring in ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce. Did you hear him outline or articulate tonight what those objectives are in order to end this war, or perhaps any off-ramps?
No, Lindsay, we didn't. And we are now 5 weeks into this war. The president just then, in his first primetime address to the nation, largely touting what he feels are the military successes so far. He claims that they have crippled Iran's military, their ability to support proxies in the region. He did say that this operation is nearing completion, though he continued to threaten continued strikes if Iran doesn't reach a deal. But, Lindsay, we did not hear much tonight that was new, even as the president is making his case very much to the American people, while also touting this as a success. He did not lay out a clear path toward ending this conflict. We didn't hear him outline those conditions that have to be met in order for this war to come to an end. And those are the critical questions that have to be answered and that are being asked by so many. What is interesting is the timing of this, of course, many wondering why the president didn't deliver a speech like this sooner. Of course, it comes as we have seen gas prices hit $4 a gallon. And as we know that rising costs are top of mind for so many Americans, and as polling shows, and the president is well aware of this, that Americans want this war to end soon, Linsey.
And Mary, you mentioned, according to a new CNN poll that was released today, 67% of Americans, in fact, say that he does not have a clear plan to handle the situation in Iran. I want to bring in ABC's Chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, did you hear anything new from the president tonight?
I listened very carefully, Linsey, for something new about his plans for ending this war, some new indication about the direction that he was going. I have to tell you candidly, there was nothing new in that speech. These are all points that he has made either in his Truth Social posts or in his many appearances over the past 4 weeks. He had said earlier today that he was going to give a speech where he would say, this is actually a quote from something he did earlier today. He said, basically, I'm going to tell everybody how great I am, what a great job I've done, what a phenomenal job. There was quite a bit of that, talking about the great success, as he sees it, of the U.S. military. I thought that what was striking is how little he talked about something that he has mentioned, and he's mentioned directly to me several times, the negotiations with the Iranians. It was almost an afterthought. He talked about how we are sending them back to the Stone Ages, bombing them back to the Stone Ages, and then the very next sentences, but we continue to have negotiations. I didn't get a sense that there's a lot of optimism expressed in that speech about an agreement with the Iranians. Really, what it was is saying that we are wrapping this up very soon, but we're going to fully finish our objectives. And if they don't agree to what they need to agree in, we are going to bomb them even harder.
John, thank you. I want to bring in ABC News Chief Global Affairs Correspondent Martha Raddatz. Martha, of course, you were in the region when the war broke out. We heard President Trump say again tonight, as he suggested this past summer, that the nuclear program in Iran has already been destroyed. I know that you had a chance to talk to a member of the Israeli military then. And what did they tell you about that?
Well, first of all, when I asked him if they had been obliterated, he said, well, if President Trump says it's been obliterated, it's been obliterated. And I said, now, wait a minute, is it true? And he said, it was severely damaged. So I think a speech like tonight not only didn't give any new information to the American public, it confuses them more. He's heard again saying they've been obliterated, they've been decimated. And certainly the tactical success in this war, the American military has performed nearly flawlessly as far as we know, but that is not a strategic objective. And we have heard President Trump, since this began, say, we've won the war. It's going to be over in 2 weeks. It's not going to be over in 2 weeks. So I think not only did he give no new information tonight, no new when will this end and why, and what objectives are we after, but it really further added to the confusion of why we are there and what is next. One thing did stand out to me tonight. He didn't mention ground troops in any way, and he has been briefed on some special operations that are possible in the region. Very complicated, very dangerous. He didn't mention anything like that tonight, Linsey.
Martha, thank you so much. I want to bring in ABC's Matt Rivers, who is in Doha for us tonight. And Matt, of course, Iran has come out contradicting a number of the statements that President Trump has said, even going as far last week as to describe any negotiations between the two countries as fake news. What's the sentiment in the region right now, and how do you think they may respond to the president's remarks tonight?
Linsey, you know the old saying, the enemy gets a vote too, right? And what we have seen is a defiant Iran from the get-go. Every time the president comes out and says something like Iran's about to capitulate or they're begging for a ceasefire deal, we very quickly hear from the Iranians that the exact opposite is true. And look at what they're doing in the Strait of Hormuz. They are keeping it closed. We have seen 2 more oil tankers hit just this week alone, including one just yesterday here where we are in Qatar. The Iranians know that even if there are negotiations going on, the single biggest point of leverage that they have in those negotiations would be the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz. They know oil prices are going up. They know gas prices are going up. They know the kind of pressure politically that puts on the White House. And so even if there are negotiations, they're going to keep that strait closed until they feel like they can't anymore. And right now they clearly feel like they still can. As far as the mood across this region, Linsey, no question the Gulf states here, this has been catastrophic for them. They want this war to end extremely soon because this is an existential crisis for some of these countries that are allies of the United States. Oil production is down. Liquid natural gas production is basically non-existent. That is going to have a very big impact on the global economy the longer this goes on.
Matt, thank you. And of course, President Trump suggested tonight that this could continue for another 2 to 3 weeks. I want to bring in retired Marine Colonel and ABC News military analyst, Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Steve, he also said, we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. Any sense of what those objectives are and how he would go about accomplishing them?
Yeah, Linsey, I heard a president say tonight that those objectives had been met. So the ability of Iran to project power offshore. Now, you talk to the UAE and Saudi, and they may not agree with that because they're still getting dozens of incoming missiles and drone attacks during the day. So I think the president's saying that in his eyes, we have accomplished what needed to be accomplished. What I did also hear was a threat, and that threat was to the countries around the world that depend on the oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz, that 20% of the daily consumption. And he was saying, we have the ability to walk away because we've met all of our objectives. So those of you who need that oil better step up and work on opening that strait. That was the implicit threat, even direct threat that I heard tonight.
John, thank you so much. Mary Bruce, I want to send it back to you for a final thought.
Linsey, we do not have many answers about what comes next year. The president is touting and claiming this war will be coming to an end soon, but we don't know what that is going to look like. And critically, while he has argued all of this is about preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, he still has not shown any evidence that they have achieved that goal. And in fact, today, when asked in an interview about whether the U.S. needs to go in and secure the remaining Iranian nuclear stockpile, the president said he doesn't think they need to do that. He's not concerned about it. He says it's so far underground. I don't care about that. Still a lot of fundamental questions here, Linsey.
A number of questions remain. Mary Bruce from the White House, thank you so much to Mary and the entire team tonight. For now, we're going to return you to regularly scheduled programming. For some of you, that's World News Tonight. And stay with ABC News Live and abcnews.com for regular updates. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Linsey Davis.
Well, good evening. I'm Perry Russelman for Linsey Davis. Thank you for streaming with us at home. We begin with President Trump's address tonight. Trump starting off by congratulating the 4 American astronauts who blasted off toward the moon just hours ago. Trump, for the first time since the start of the war against Iran 32 days ago, speaking directly to the American people. Take a listen.
Our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed, hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before, and annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it.
President Trump did not lay out how the U.S. will determine when it will wrap up the war with Iran. He went on to say this.
Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong. In the meantime, discussions are ongoing. Regime change was not our goal. We never said regime change, but regime change has occurred because of all of their original leaders' death. They're all dead. The new group is less radical and much more reasonable. Yet if during this period of time no deal is made, we have our eyes on key targets. If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard.
Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl joins us now. And John, Trump went on to say we are getting very close to finishing the job. As for gas prices, he is calling these short-term increases as gas is going over $4 a gallon nationwide. And he is blaming Iran for that when they attacked other countries in the Middle East. As for the Strait of Hormuz, he claims that this does not affect the U.S. He says other countries will have to grab and cherish it. His words there, telling those countries to build up delayed courage and take it. What are your thoughts on what we heard tonight?
Well, first of all, there really wasn't anything new in the speech. This is kind of a collection of what he has been saying through his Truth Social posts and some of his public statements, and expressing, complete, supreme confidence about what will happen in Iran. At one point, he said, again, something he has actually said before, but that the Strait of Hormuz will open up automatically once the U.S. military operation is over. He explained because the Iranians will want to be able to get their oil out on the world market. As for that notion that we shouldn't be concerned about the Strait of Hormuz because we don't buy our oil largely, from anything that comes out of the strait. Technically, it's correct that we don't necessarily buy our oil coming through tankers that flow through the Strait of Hormuz, but it's a global oil market, and when the price of oil is $100+ a barrel, that is felt around the world, including in the United States, and it is because of that that we are seeing gas prices at a 2-3 year high here, maybe 4-year high in some places here in the United States. So look, not much new. The one part of the speech that I thought was the most significant is what you just alluded to at the end, where he said that we will continue until our objectives are fully achieved. And he said, thanks to the progress we have made, we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. Now, what does that mean? He goes on to say over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we are going to be bombing them back into the Stone Ages. And I thought that one transition was quite remarkable because the very next sentence, he says discussions with the Iranians are continuing. So discussions with a nation that you are bombing to the Stone Ages. That kind of sums up Trump. It's the big threats, and it's the offer of a very quick resolution. I'm not sure he's going to get to that here.
And Trump's... Yeah, and Trump started tonight by saying that he was going to be giving an update on the war, why it's necessary to keep the U.S. involved and keep the world safe. I mean, his message to Americans tonight, one thing I wrote down, he said, this is an investment in your children's and grandchildren's future. Do you think the message to Americans tonight was clear on why the U.S. is involved?
I mean, the message was clear. Whether or not it'll be convincing to Americans is another question. The message that they have really settled on is that Iran was on the verge of getting a nuclear bomb, and that Trump says that they were going to use very quickly, and that all that Iran has done, and Iran has been a prime state sponsor of terrorism in the Middle East. Iran has done great damage to U.S. interests in the region. That they would have nuclear blackmail, the ability to blackmail the United States and the rest of the world if they had a nuclear weapon. Now, whether or not Americans find that convincing, right now we've seen pretty convincing poll numbers, not just one poll or 2 polls or 3 polls, but all of them over the last few weeks, showing that a very solid majority of Americans have deep uneasiness about this war and oppose this war. But he outlined he thinks that he's done something that would protect Americans' interests, not just in the short term, but in the long term, by ensuring that Iran won't have a nuclear weapon. That's what he's saying.
John Karl, thank you. Let's bring in Martha Raddatz from Moore, our Chief Global Affairs anchor. And Martha, President Trump mentioned the 13 American service members who were killed, saying he wants to honor them by finishing the job here. What stood out to you tonight?
Well, that certainly stood out. But it is also how disconnected Americans are from this war. And that is one reason that President Trump tried to give this speech and make things clear, which really didn't happen tonight. It is really unprecedented that we would start a war of this scale without a president talking about it or debating it in the public or having Congress involved in some way before those attacks were launched. We have right now had 300 service members injured, several of them serious, in addition to those who have been killed. And the president hasn't really talked about that. The Pentagon does have briefings, but they don't answer a lot of questions, and they don't give a lot of information about what is exactly happening to those service members. We know some of our bases have been attacked. We don't really know what the damage is to those bases. We certainly know some of our allies in the region have been attacked. So Iran is not exactly surrendering and giving up here. They are still launching missiles. They are still fighting the United States. And one of the things we keep hearing is this changing timeline from the very beginning. If you remember, a few weeks in, when he was mad at the British Prime Minister because he didn't want to send people to help open the strait, he said, "We don't need your help. We've already won." So the Americans are getting these all kinds of mixed messages. It's going to be over in a couple of weeks. More than 2.5 weeks ago, the energy secretary told me it would be over in 2 weeks, if not less. That has not happened. So the Americans deserve to know why that hasn't happened, why this timeline has changed, and what really is the objective. You also got to think back that President Trump was angry about the protesters, the tens of thousands of protesters that have been killed by Iran, and he made threats about that. But then that changed. The objective was then nuclear. The president had said the nuclear weapons program was obliterated last summer. It clearly was not, if they have to go back and do it again. And he said that is his objective. And then he says, you know, I'm not worried about the uranium that's buried deep in the earth right now. So I think it is further confusing the American people exactly why this will end, when this will end, and whether the objectives have been met, Perry.
And then the latest timeline he gave tonight, Martha, was 2 to 3 weeks going forward. And one of the questions we had going into tonight, what would President Trump mention? What would he not mention? One thing he did not mention, troops on the ground. Your thoughts on that?
He did not. And of course, we know we have Marines heading there. Some are already in the area. And we have the 82nd Airborne in there as well, or on their way in some sort of base in the region. Don't know what they're going to do, but we do know, according to sources, that the president has been briefed on the possibility they could go in and try to get that uranium. That would be an incredibly complicated mission and a very dangerous mission as well. They could go to Karg Island, but he did not talk about that. He did say again and again that they would take further action if the Iranians do not behave. But again, no timeline. You say he said 2 or 3 weeks. He said that before, and that has passed.
Martha Raddatz, thank you. Let's bring in Matt Rivers. He's in the Middle East tonight. So, Matt, President Trump said that Iran's Navy is gone. The Air Force is in ruins with nearly 13,000 targets hit so far by the U.S. So how are strikes in the region looking at the moment?
Well, we've seen some of the most intense fighting of this entire war in just the last few days, and that's kind of struck me, Perry, as we continue to go back and forth on the status of negotiations, who's saying what. The president says negotiations are going forward, and yet we continue to see incredibly intense strikes across the region, in Iran, in Israel, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Qatar. You know, it goes on. And what you continue to hear from the Iranians is defiance. The president can say whatever he wants. He can say that they are begging for a deal. He can say that he believes a deal will happen soon. But at least publicly, what we're hearing from the Iranians is nothing but defiance. It was earlier today, after the president came out and said the quote, new president of Iran that he was negotiating with wants a ceasefire. Just a few minutes later, we got a statement from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the heart of that country's military, saying the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed, that they will not be agreeing to any ceasefire anytime soon. And so, look, there's no question that Iran's military capabilities have been severely degraded as a result of this. But Iran is not yet defeated, and they know that by keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, it is a point of leverage, the biggest point of leverage that they have. And so they're not going to walk away from that unless they feel like they've kind of have no other choice in the matter or benefits them in some way.
And then to counter that, I mean, President Trump said tonight, we have the cards, they have none. He's threatening to bomb them back into the Stone Age. He says if there is no deal, they will hit their energy facility, something that they have not done yet, I believe. Matt, correct me on that if I'm wrong. And then even entertain the idea of going after their oil facilities. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you could certainly escalate if you're the United States from this point. I mean, you heard Martha talking about it. They could use those ground forces in a number of different ways in Iran. You could go after energy infrastructure, although we have seen the Israelis go after different infrastructure sites within Iran. There's no question that the U.S. could inflict more pain on Iran should it want to do that. But the question is, what is the calculation that the United States is going to make? And that is something that Iran is very, very aware of. They know the political pressures that President Trump is facing. They see the same poll numbers and approval ratings that we do. And so when you're looking at how the Iranians are going to respond here, they're going to take it right up to the edge. Remember, this is an existential fight for this regime. They don't have a lot of incentive, at least right now, to just give up, because for them that means it's over. And so they're going to go down swinging, you have to imagine. Could it get a lot worse? Could we see U.S. troops on the ground? Absolutely. But the Iranians could also do even more on their side to make this more painful for the United States and the global economy. All right, Matt Rivers, thank you. So let's bring in ABC News contributor and retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Steve, thank you for joining us here tonight. First off, your reaction to what we heard or maybe didn't hear from President Trump.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, Perry, we did not hear was the nuclear, the highly enriched uranium and the nuclear facilities. And during the day and for the past couple of days, the administration's sort of been playing that down. And the president said today, I don't really care about it anymore. If we do, we'll go back and do, quote, spot hits. So I think what may have happened here is in the past few days, the U.S. and Israeli attacks have gone after the sites that were previously hit. Natanz, Isfahan, Iraq, all those places where the nuclear program was before. It seems that the U.S. and Israel have gone back and hit them again, tried to bury that nuclear capability as deeply as they could. And so what the president was saying was, I've sort of checked the nuclear problem off the list because we know that we've buried it. And if we see that they go and try to unbury it with our satellites, then we can go back and tap it again. With our spot hits, as he said. So I think it's kind of interesting that they talked about we've taken care of the Army, the Navy, we've taken care of the missile production, and we've taken care of, at least notionally, their ability to hit Israel and the United States. But the nuclear problem has got that quiet check mark, and it was not addressed tonight.
Steve, we talked about it with Martha. No mention of troops on the ground. What do you think the likelihood is that we see American troops on the ground in Iran?
Given what the president said tonight, it's hard to see why. Why would you want to take the risk? Because every time we think about putting boots on the ground, we know that that's an exponential kind of risk, increase in risk to U.S. forces. So if the war is going as swimmingly as the president said it was, and that we have only 2 or 3 more weeks, we're sort of winding down, we're sort of in the secondary, tertiary target list here. Why put boots on the ground? And the question is, what would they do? The one thing I do think is interesting, Perry, is that we're seeing some reports out of southern Iran around the Bandar Abbas area, which is right at the top of the Strait of Hormuz. And it seems like that the U.S. and Israel are beginning to focus more attacks down by the mouth of the Gulf. So is this in preparation to try to take out any resistance, any kind of anti-ship missiles, any kind of capability to keep the strait bottled up? We'll see. But clearly, if the president is willing to walk away from the strait, as he indicated tonight, and leave that to the rest of the world that relies on the oil that comes out of the strait, that will be a different ending to this war than was previously thought of even a couple of days ago.
Steve Ganyard, thank you for your time tonight. Let's bring in senior White House correspondent Selena Wang. So, Selena, what are your biggest takeaways from Trump's speech tonight?
Well, Perry, I think it's worth reiterating that we are 5 weeks into this war, and parts of his primetime address is really what you would have expected the president to do before this conflict began, to sell to the American people about why taking this risk was necessary. But now, 5 weeks in, the president is continuing to try and give a justification to the American people about why we took this step, but we didn't really get clear answers about when this is going to wrap up, why exactly when we went into there, and what the objectives are going to be in order for the U.S. to pull out. The president giving really no clear path to ending this conflict. We did hear him repeat what he has been repeating over the last several weeks, that this was an outstanding military success when it comes to annihilating its Navy, getting rid of the ballistic missile threat, also the nuclear threat, claiming that that has been solved, though Perry, military not providing any public evidence to do so, as international inspectors are still warning that there is still a lot of highly enriched uranium buried deep underground. And I think, Harry, also worth mentioning that the president barely acknowledged the economic fallout here, as so many Americans are feeling the pain at the pump. Gas prices, diesel prices skyrocketing. The president claiming this is just a short-term blip. The president really not empathizing when it comes to the economic challenges here.
So let's talk about negotiations, Selena. President Trump saying we have all the cards, they have none. He says we are getting very close to finishing the job. Where do negotiations stand right now?
Yeah, Perry, and in the same breath that he says this war is almost over, but we are going to continue to hit them hard over the next few weeks. He then says, meanwhile, talks are ongoing. We really didn't hear a whole lot from the president about these ongoing negotiations. Earlier today, he claimed that Iran is the one that wants this ceasefire, but the U.S. is not going to do so unless they reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We have been learning from sources that Vice President J.D. Vance has telegraphed through mediators to the Iranians that the U.S. is open to a deal if they meet U.S. demands, including reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But we're told that administration officials acknowledge that the U.S. may end up pulling out of this military conflict while that critical waterway is still under the control of the Iranians, which of course would have a devastating impact on the global economy.
Selena Wang, live in Washington. Selena, thank you. Now to our other top story tonight, the successful liftoff for NASA's Artemis II rocket, the first crewed journey around the moon in more than 50 years. Take a look. We're getting our first look at the astronauts inside the shuttle as they orbit the Earth. Just a few hours ago, this site at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the engines igniting, lifting off, rising above Florida there, the spacecraft lifting off propelled by one of the most powerful rockets ever made. The first critical minutes of its flight going just as planned. Spectators on the ground cheering at liftoff, feeling the vibrations from the rocket even though they were miles away. Their phones out, sunglasses on. One of the first views from space here, just incredible. Earth there with the sun setting behind. The booster rockets putting the spacecraft into orbit, separating successfully before falling back into the ocean. At the top of the rocket, 4 astronauts right there strapped into the Orion spacecraft. They are setting out on a 10-day mission going deeper into space than anyone has ever gone before. They will first orbit the Earth, then fire up a rocket that will take them to the moon. They'll travel to the dark side of the moon before coming back to Earth. Mission control at Johnson Space Center right there in Houston, taking over the mission. The 10-day mission has a lofty goal: prepare the way for future flights that will land astronauts on the moon who will build a permanent base there. Here's Gio Benitez.
And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7. RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Tonight, the Artemis II mission is underway. 4 astronauts on a 10-day mission to the moon and back.
Roger, roll pitch.
The Orion spacecraft lifting off, powered by that massive 322-foot tall, 6 million pound rocket packed with more than 700,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and hydrogen.
Passing 1 minute. Approaching max Q.
Crowds at Kennedy Space Center clamoring to watch it soar through the air.
Integrity guidance converged.
On board, Commander Reed Weissman, a 50-year-old fighter pilot and father of 2 from Baltimore, who's led multiple spacewalks while on board the International Space Station. In the pilot's seat, Captain Victor Glover. He's from Pomona, California, and he and his wife Deanna have 4 children. Mission Specialist Christina Cook, who made history as part of an all-female spacewalk back in 2019, and Canadian Mission Specialist Jeremy Hansen. It's the father of 3's first time going into space and the first Canadian to shoot to the moon. Before launch, teams checking those suits. Then, just as astronauts have done in past missions, a bit of superstition, playing cards until everyone loses a hand to leave bad luck behind. Then a group photo and a thank you to their support team. And just like the Apollo astronauts did before them some 50 years ago, the astronauts walking out of those famous doors to the outside world.
Thank you all for being out here. It's a great day for us.
Saying one final goodbye to their family and friends before they hopped in the Astrovan for the ride to Launch Complex 39B at Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. Their path lined with supporters waving flags and cheering, a quick thumbs up before taking the elevator up to the capsule. Teams in the sterile white room helping the astronauts with their gloves and helmets, then shutting the hatch door. The spacecraft, about the size of a 6-person tent, the astronauts nicknamed it Integrity. Orion will orbit the Earth for the first day as crews with mission control make sure all systems are working properly. Then they'll slingshot towards the moon and around it, seeing the far side of the moon for the first time in more than half a century. Once they're out of the moon's orbit, Earth's gravity takes over, and with the help of 12 thrusters that keep the capsule on track, Orion heads back to Earth. Hitting Earth's atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles an hour, Orion's heat shield will protect the crew from temperatures nearing 5,000 degrees before it splashes down in the Pacific.
Splashdown.
They won't land on the moon. This mission is a quest to test the abilities of the Orion spacecraft, which NASA plans to use as America's vehicle for future lunar journeys as they work to establish a long-term presence there and hopefully use the moon as a base to explore other planets like Mars.
All right, thank you, Gio. Let's bring in retired NASA astronaut, aerospace engineer, commander of 2 space shuttle missions, Susan Kilrain. Susan, thank you for joining us again tonight. So NASA says there was a momentary comms issue where the crew could hear mission control. Mission control could not hear the crew. A few other issues with valves and a toilet, apparently. How normal is it to have issues like this at this point?
No, it's extremely normal. There's always going to be a handful of things, and you always just hope that they're not the things that can slow the mission down. And so far, they've been able to continue on without any issues. In fact, they are 13,000 miles away from Earth right now. That's a number that's really hard to wrap my head around. The International Space Station maxes out at about 250 miles, and they're 13,000 miles away.
We have a live look on the screen here. What would their bodies be feeling that far away from Earth?
They're actually decelerating a little bit right now. They are in the kind of weightless part of space. Gravity didn't go away. It's just it's orbital mechanics that makes us float when we're in space. So they are feeling the floating. And they're probably also just so busy that they don't even have time to really think about it or even really to enjoy the view.
All right, Susan, thank you. Let's bring in National Geographic explorer and space robotics expert, Jess Todd. Jess, thank you for joining us again. A very exciting night. What are you looking forward to the next couple of days for this team?
Well, the next day is going to be where they do their close proximity operation. So this is testing out the Orion capsule's ability to come near another spacecraft in preparation for Artemis 3, where they plan on docking with a lander in low Earth orbit. And then they'll do their translunar injection burn, which will send them on their free return trajectory to the moon.
So for some reason, I'm fascinated by this slingshotting around the moon. I think I saw it in some sci-fi show that I saw. It's so fascinating. How does this all work? What happens when they reach the moon?
So essentially, as they get closer to the moon, they'll shift from being within the Earth's sphere of gravitational influence to the moon's sphere of gravitational influence. And that gravity will actually pull them around the moon. And then as they come out the other side, it's like a slingshot. That gravity pushes them around, and then as they come back around, Earth sort of picks them up again and brings them home.
What do we hope to learn from this mission? What can humans learn from this mission?
So there's a big focus on this mission on the space environment. This is the furthest we're sending humans out in the last 54 years. We've come a long way in terms of technology, and we have a much better understanding of the human body and how it's impacted by space. With plans for a long-term lunar base, we really need to understand what that radiation environment is going to do to any human cells. So there's a ton of experiments on board that are looking specifically at the radiation environment, its impact on human tissue, as well as its impact on the electronics of the spacecraft itself. Plus, the astronauts are being monitored for their sleep, for other health indicators, wearing a bunch of wearable sensors. So there's a ton that we're going to learn over the next 10 days that will pave the way for longer and longer missions.
It looks like something this is a live picture we have up. It looks like something just stuck out the side of the Orion. What is that?
So I think that's the solar panels. So as they're coming around the Earth, they're coming into and out of the sun, and they're using their solar panels to charge. That's what I would guess that is, but that is part of their sort of power system. We hope to use that, to power the Orion capsule. So they'll have deployed those, to capture sunlight.
Just Todd. Thank you. We appreciate it. And that's our show for this hour. I'm Perry Russom. Thank you for streaming with us. Stay with ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories.
Is there anything about Pat Summitt fans would not know?
This is where my basketball career started. Hard to believe, isn't it?
I had to work a lot harder, had a lot more responsibility.
She could coach any team.
Pat put it out there that women can do whatever they want to do. She was such a radical. She saw beyond basketball.
How do you beat Pat Summitt? You don't.
What else do you need in your life? Just more time.
She's on fire.
Is this hard to talk about?
Yeah,
Seattle ground's about to take off. It's going to be crazy. I did a kind of a bad thing.
So you hijacked the plane?
Yeah.
He hasn't flown an airplane before.
How did he get that plane in the air, and how did no one know?
Hey, you think this thing can do a barrel roll?
Trying to figure out how to use the autopilot first.
Boring.